I'm Danny, the engineer at Classic Performance Products. So today we're going to show you how to install the Mustang toolkit in the Ford F100. This frame has already been cut. We're going to go and show you a frame that has not been cut yet. We're going to show you where the cuts need to be made at. And then we're going to come back over here. We're going to bolt this thing all together. So here we are over here with another F100 frame. This one has not been cut up yet. As a general rule, when we start, I like to add a little brace across the front of the frame that you see up here. That's going to help hold it stable. As we start cutting this, the frame gets fully flimsy. The cut's really simple. We're just going to run a cut vertically from the bottom rail up to the top on this crossmember, run right down the frame rail on the crossmember itself, and then just come down on the back. When we get to the opposite side, we're going to run up the same way, follow the frame rail across the top. Back at the steering box area, you're going to have to cut the steering box brace out. It's a little bit different, but it's a vertical cut right there. After we take this out of the way, the coil buckets come off. There's some rivets and some bolts. You unbolt the coil buckets, drill out the rivets, and then those come out of the way as one big piece, and you're all done. So there are a few different F100 type frames that are out there. I believe this is a 3/4 ton, and if you notice, this coil bucket's formed a little bit differently, as well as this crossmember. There's just some small changes, but for the most part, it's really going to interchange with our crossmember the way it's mounting in. But don't be alarmed if your chassis doesn't look exactly like the chassis we're working on. Okay, so we're back over here at our F100 where we're going to install the Mustang toolkit. You can see the skeleton of what was left after cutting out that crossmember. In our case, there wasn't an extra brace that was inside, but it all cuts out pretty straightforward. Then you can see all the bolt holes that are remaining from the rivets and the bolt holes that we're going to use to bolt the crossmember in. Okay, so after the frame has been prepared, the first step is going to be cutting a notch in the frame for the rack and pinion C-notch. Pretty basic. You basically just got to come off of the measure from the bolt hole on the bottom of the frame. It's about 2.5 inches forward. That's where this notch needs to start, and then measure how wide this notch needs to be. It looks like 3.5 inches, and we'll go mark the frame and make that cut. So I'm going to come off of the center of this forward bolt hole. It's roughly 2.5 inches is where that notch is going to start, which is roughly right here. And then I need another 3.5 inches back here. If I've cut this a little short, it doesn't really matter. I can go back and I could add some more cut to this later. So that I got my frame marked with the measurement, I'm just going to draw a straight line all the way over twice with where this mark needs to be. That'll be my initial cut, and then I'm going to measure up and do a little angle on the side. Now that we've laid out our first mark where we think that this notch needs to be, I'm going to hold this crossmember up in the frame, and then we could look around on the side over there and we can see that the notch is in fact lined up with where it needs to be cut. Looks like Gary's drilling the pilot hole first, and he's going to come back and make that a larger hole. All right, so we've cut the C-notch. We did a little sanding by hand with the hand sander to make sure it's right, and it fits really nice. Your side look good, Gary?
Oh, beautiful.
All right, so now we're going to get the nut plates and the spring hatch and start mounting the upper spring mounts. All right, so these are the nut plates that are going to go inside the frame. The hardware is going to be accessible on the outside. This piece floats and interlocks onto this piece, and it's going to hold on to the motor mounts and the top of the spring mount when this is all done. And this is going to go in the side of the frame and hold on to the side of the upper AR mount. That just lays into here to start with. Inside of each of these nuts, they've been relieved for the thread as a long pilot. It's really easy to get the bolts to line up, and you really can't cross thread it. It's kind of cross thread proof. So this nut plate is going to go behind the upper spring mount and then on top of the frame. The bottom nuts that are captured are going to be in the crossmember. Then these captured nuts are going to be in the crossmember. These nuts are going to be up on top of the AR mount. The crossmember is going to go in. I just want to make sure I got that in the general location, because in one moment we'll bring the crossmember up, get it started, then we can start tightening down these bolts.
Right there.
Thank you. I'm just trying to get these bolts to start, and then once we get them all started, we're going to tighten things up. All right, right, the cross member is in, it's tight. We got 2 more holes to drill on each side, and that's a wrap. Okay, over here. Now that the cross member has been installed, we tightened up all the bolts for the last 4 holes on the front, two on either side. We're going to cut this cross brace out of here that we temporarily put in. That was just holding the frame. Next thing we're going to do is hang the lower control arms on the cross member. Then we're going to put the rack on. We're going to work our way up with springs and shocks from there.
Just keep it separated like that.
Okay, so we're going to install a power rack and pinion on this kit. Now, we do offer these in manual or power. They are the exact same price either way. So since it costs the same, it seems like a no-brainer. We're going to go with power. It's what we sell about 99% of the time. Okay, we're going to load the stock height Mustang 2 springs. These are really tricky. I always recommend using a spring compressor. It can be very dangerous. So we're installing the upper control arms now that we've got the spring and shock in. You might have noticed that that's the conventional spring and shock. There is a coilover option that we may do later on this truck. But the upper A-arms go on pretty straightforward. They align with alignment shims instead of sliding in a slot. There is 3 positions on the mounting point for the arm. So you could adjust the arm position for caster. So you can have a little bit less caster, maybe for manual steering, and if you wanted a heavier steering feel, you can run it to the further back position for more caster. We're going to run it in the middle position to start. There's just enough room here to slide our motor mounts on when we get ready to put the motor mounts up. This is our modular stock height Mustang 2 spindle. Modular because we can change the mounting brackets and go from a smaller brake to a larger brake. We're using our performance brake kit on this application today. This is going to have a 11 3/4 inch disc. It's really straightforward fit here. The ball joints go right on, and our modular design is made so that we do not need any spacers. All right, so we got our modular spindle up here. This is a stock height modular spindle. We've already packed the bearings with grease. We've installed the grease seal. Now we're just going to assemble the hub, which is as easy as sliding the bearing on. And then Johnny is going to come over here with the outer bearing. It's also greased. This is the washer. It has a little tang. It keeps it from turning. If you turn the bearing while you tighten the nut, you will help seat the bearings. And just a little bit of torque, spin the bearing, and a little bit of torque, spin this bearing, and this is well seated. So now I'm going to back it off till it's free. And just bring it up so it still turns relatively easy. All right, cotter pin's going to go in, and that should be ready to go. I'm going to flatten it down, so there's no sharp edge sticking out. Okay, so this is a desk cap. It's just going to go on and keep the grease contained here so you don't get a big mess in your wheel later on. It protects the bearings. And I'm going to try to tap it on with a big socket. All right, we just tightened up the caliper bracket, and we're going to steer it back straight. Get us a rotor, and then install the caliper. So right now we're going to install this sway bar, and to maybe make this go easier, I expect it to be easier, I'm going to start by attaching it to the control arms first, and then we're going to swing it back in position as if it was going to be mounted. Then we're going to go and install the bushings.
At this point, we're going to put the tie rod ends on the rack.
So now that we got the suspension in place, with the spindles and the A-arms, it looks like we're just about wrapping this thing up. We're going to go ahead and install the cotter pins. We're kind of waiting just in case we had to take something out later. It'd be easier to do that. Here we go. 1 cotter pin installed. Now the cross member is all the way in. We're going to take out these 2 bolts on each side that hold the top of the spring plate on and get the motor mount in place. It uses the same hardware in the same location. If you remember from the beginning, there is a nut plate that's floating inside the frame right now. It's trapped, so we can remove this and then reinstall it without fear of losing the hardware inside the frame. As we're getting the other mount in, it probably became pretty obvious to you right here that this engine is nowhere near on center. It's lined up the way Ford lined it up from the beginning, which was way offset. It's kind of obvious when you look back at the floor how much floor is on this side of the frame and how much floor is on that side of the frame. Everything is shifted. So we've kept the engine in the right location to match the tunnel, so the dry shaft and your shift linkage and everything else is still going to work. This is an original Ford V8 FE engine that was in this truck originally with the front sump oil pan. That's how the two-wheel drives came. So we're going to put our Fit Right system on here in just a moment, which is going to slide front to back, and then we're going to put this FE V8 back inside with the brand new Mustang 2 and those brand new mounts. There it is, our F100 Mustang toolkit installed with the FE V8 front sump oil pan with the rack and pinion, all bolted together. It just took the help of a couple of guys. We got Johnny and Gary helping us. As you can see, it fits well. This has got a 3-inch adjustable range on the engine. When it's done, the transmission mount, you just drill 2 holes. Fits GM and Ford transmissions. It got you covered. For more information on this and other projects that we've covered, you can visit us on the web at classictruckperformance.com or subscribe to our YouTube channel.